1. The wild demands respect, a lesson written in blood across these 6 tragic encounters. For those who venture into bear country, the margin between awe and disaster is razor thin. These aren't just wilderness tales. They're raw accounts of ordinary people whose lives were forever changed in the span of seconds. Retirees on peaceful hikes, seasoned guides doing their jobs, children enjoying family camping trips. All discovered too late that nature plays by its own brutal rules. The survivors carry physical and emotional scars that never fully heal, while those who didn't make it serve as sobering reminders of our fragile place in the natural world. Listen closely because these stories might just save your life. Xenotation spot: even the most cautious outdoorsmen can find themselves in mortal danger when bears are involved. Take Kayla Hayes, a vibrant 24-year-old photographer from Seattle who joined a guided tour in Denali National Park. Like many visitors, she assumed the presence of an experienced guide guaranteed her safety. She couldn't have been more mistaken. Despite multiple warnings to maintain distance, Kayla's desire for the perfect close-up shot overrode her common sense. What happened next serves as one of Alaska's most horrific bear attack stories on record, a gruesome reminder that overconfidence in the wild can be deadly. The other tourists on that trip still have nightmares about what they witnessed that day. Xenotation spot: Mason Shaw, a 35-year-old wildlife photographer from Colorado, considered himself an experienced outdoorsman. His solo kayaking expedition through Glacier Bay was supposed to be the adventure of a lifetime. But one moment of distraction, one failure to scan the shoreline thoroughly, nearly cost him everything. "I heard the splash before I saw it," Mason recalls, his voice still trembling years later. This 1,000-pound grizzly came charging out of nowhere, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move. What followed was a desperate, bloody struggle for survival in the freezing Alaskan waters, with Mason fighting not just the bear, but the creeping numbness of hypothermia as his life literally slipped through his fingers. Xenotation spot: Kayla Hayes had built a following on social media with her daring nature photography. That sunny July morning in Denali, the massive grizzly digging for salmon along the riverbank presented the perfect shot. Despite guide Walt Jennings' explicit warnings to stay behind the safety line, Kayla crept forward, smartphone extended. The bear noticed her movement immediately. "I'll never forget the sound," Walt says, his eyes distant. No growl, no warning, just this terrible silence as it covered 60 yards in seconds. The attack was so swift that by the time Walt could react, Kayla was already on the ground, her terrified screams abruptly cut short. The other tourists could only watch in paralyzed horror as nature demonstrated its merciless power. Xenotation spot: veteran guide Walt Jennings had led hundreds of tours through Denali's wilderness without incident. The 57-year-old Alaskan knew better than anyone how quickly situations with bears could turn deadly. That's why he'd given clear instructions to his group that morning. Stay together, remain quiet, and never approach closer than 100 yards. When Kayla Hayes ignored his warnings and moved toward the grizzly, Walt's shouted commands were lost in the wind. His warning shot did nothing to deter the charging bear. "You train for these situations," Walt says quietly, "but nothing prepares you for watching someone die right in front of you, knowing you couldn't stop it." The guilt still haunts him years later. Xenotation spot: imagine standing helpless as a young woman is torn apart just yards away. That was the horrific reality for the 30 tourists on Walt Jennings' Denali tour. Retirees from Florida, a family from Ohio, honeymooners from California, all united in trauma by what they witnessed. Some collapsed to their knees, others turned away vomiting, a few simply froze in shock. "The worst part was the sounds," recalls Margaret Simmons, 68. "The wet tearing noises, the crunching. It's been 5 years and I still hear them when I try to sleep." Many required extensive counseling afterward, and not a single person from that group has returned to bear country since. Some experiences change you forever. Xenotation spot: when Denali Park rangers arrived at the attack scene, they faced a grim task. Blood stained the tundra for yards around, mingled with torn fragments of clothing and camping gear. The bear, still agitated, had dragged Kayla's remains into nearby brush. Experienced as they were, even the rangers were shaken. "We recover hikers from falls, avalanche victims," says Ranger Mark Tolbert. "But a predatory mauling, that stays with you." The painstaking process of recovering what little remained took hours, with armed rangers standing guard against the still-present bear. For Kayla's parents back in Seattle, the rangers' official report would be the closest thing to closure they'd ever get, though no explanation could ever make sense of losing their daughter to a moment's reckless decision. Xenotation spot following protocol. Alaska wildlife officials tracked and euthanized the grizzly that killed Kayla Hayes. While necessary for public safety, the decision sparked debate. That bear was just being a bear, argues biologist Dr. Susan Choi. It didn't break any natural laws. We did by getting too close. Others, like Kayla's father, saw it as justice. That monster took my little girl. Veteran guide Walt Jennings wrestles with mixed feelings. We invade their home, then punish them for reacting. But what choice do we have? It's an ethical dilemma with no easy answers, highlighting the complex relationship between humans and the wilderness we insist on exploring. Xenotation spot Glacier Bay's stunning fjords attract adventurers like Mason Shaw, who underestimate their dangers. The 35-year-old Colorado native had kayaked across the West, but Alaska presented different challenges. "You're not just dealing with currents and weather," Mason explains. "There are predators here that see you as potential prey." That lesson came brutally clear when a massive grizzly burst from shoreline brush, drawn by the splashing of Mason's paddle. In seconds, the bear was upon him, claws ripping through his kayak like tissue paper. "One minute I'm admiring the scenery," Mason recalls. "The next I'm fighting for my life in water so cold it takes your breath away." Alaska's beauty, he learned, is matched only by its capacity for sudden violence. Xenotation spot the attack happened with terrifying speed. Mason Shaw's kayak capsized instantly under the grizzly's weight, plunging him into the frigid Alaskan waters. As he struggled to surface, the bear's claws raked his back, turning the water crimson around him. "I remember thinking how absurd it was," Mason says. "Here I was, a grown man, being tossed around like a rag doll by this force of nature." The cold shocked his system even as the pain from his wounds burned. Survival instincts kicked in. He managed to kick the bear's snout, creating just enough distance to gasp for air. But with blood loss and hypothermia setting in, Mason knew he couldn't last long. Then, miraculously, the distant putter of a fishing boat's engine cut through the chaos. Would they see him in time? Mason Shaw's voice still shakes when he recounts those horrifying moments in Glacier Bay. The pain was unreal, he admits. But worse was the realization that this was really happening. As the grizzly's jaws clamped down on his shoulder, his mind raced with terrifying clarity. He could feel the bear's hot breath, hear the sickening crunch of his own bones, smell the metallic tang of his blood mixing with salt water. Time slowed down, Mason recalls. "I thought about my wife waiting back home, about all the things I'd never get to do. What saved him wasn't strength or skill, but sheer stubborn will to survive. That and the miraculous arrival of fisherman Jim Barnes, who still checks in on Mason every anniversary of the attack. The old fishing skiff cutting through Glacier Bay's waters that day carried Jim Barnes, a 62-year-old Alaskan native who'd spent decades on these waters. At first, he mistook the splashing for seals, but something made him look closer. Saw this red cloud in the water, Jim remembers. Then an arm flailing. What he found was beyond his worst nightmares. Mason Shaw, barely conscious, his wetsuit shredded and the water around him stained crimson. Jim hauled Mason aboard with strength he didn't know he had, using towels from his lunch cooler to staunch the bleeding. "Kept telling him to stay with me," Jim says, his voice gruff with emotion. The 90-minute race to the nearest ranger station was the longest of both their lives, with Mason slipping in and out of consciousness, whispering apologies to his wife as if they might be his last words. The Sanders family's camping trip in Yellowstone was supposed to create happy memories. For 10-year-old Zoe Brooks, it became a nightmare that still gives her panic attacks 5 years later. That sunny afternoon, Zoe had begged to help gather firewood near their Sugarlands Valley campsite. Just stay where we can see you, her mother Jenna had called after her. But children's curiosity knows no bounds, and Zoe wandered just beyond the tree line where the black bear had been quietly foraging. Wildlife experts later determined it was a young male, underweight after hibernation and dangerously food-focused. When it caught Zoe's scent and charged, there was no warning growl, no false charge, just 250 pounds of desperate predator barreling toward an oblivious little girl humming to herself as she collected sticks. Jenna Mitchell will never forget the blood-curdling scream that tore through the peaceful Yellowstone afternoon. Every mother knows her child's voice, and this was Zoe's, but unlike any sound she'd ever made before. Jenna and her husband Scott dropped everything and ran toward the terrible noise, their minds refusing to process what they found. Their baby girl pinned beneath a black bear, its jaws clamped on her tiny leg as she flailed and screamed. Scott, an Army veteran, reacted with primal fury, grabbing the nearest rock and hurling it at the bear's head while roaring like a madman. The startled bear released Zoe just long enough for Jenna to snatch her up, but the damage was done. Deep puncture wounds in Zoe's thigh, a broken arm from being shaken, and psychological scars no child should ever bear. The aftermath at the Sanders campsite looked like something from a horror movie. Blood splattered across their cheerful yellow tent, the once pristine sleeping bag now serving as a makeshift trauma dressing for Zoe's leg. Park rangers arrived within 20 minutes, their faces grim as they assessed the situation. While medics stabilized Zoe, other rangers tracked the bear, finding it still lurking nearby, drawn by the scent of blood and the family's food supplies. We got lucky, Scott admits now. If that bear had been truly predatory instead of just food-stressed, he can't finish the thought. Zoe survived after emergency surgery and months of physical therapy, but the family never camped again. Their once beloved camping gear gathered dust in the garage until Scott finally donated it all, unable to look at the bloodstains that never fully came out. Vince Shaw had logged over 10,000 backcountry miles in Idaho's Frank Church Wilderness without incident. The 49-year-old guide prided himself on meticulous preparation, always carrying bear spray, making noise in brushy areas, properly storing food. But even experts can get complacent. That fateful August morning, Vince led his group across the Salmon River shallows, focused more on his client's footing than his surroundings. The female Grizzly, hidden in the willows with her cubs, saw them as a threat. 1 second we're laughing about wet boots, recalls client Nate Reynolds. The next Vince is screaming bear, and we see this brown blur charging. What happened next became legend among wilderness guides. How Vince survived being ragdolled by a protective mother grizzly through sheer grit and quick thinking. When the grizzly slammed into Vince Shaw, his prized hunting rifle might as well have been a toy. The impact sent it flying into the river as the bear's crushing weight pinned him underwater. I remember thinking, this is how I die drowned in 2 feet of water, Vince recalls, but survival instinct kicked in. Grabbing a driftwood branch, he swung blindly upward as he surfaced, catching the bear across the snout. The enraged animal swiped at him, claws opening deep gashes across his chest. But Vince kept swinging, yelling obscenities between gulps of air. His clients, frozen in terror, finally snapped into action, one firing bear spray while others screamed and threw rocks. After what felt like hours but was likely less than a minute, the bear retreated to her cubs, leaving Vince broken but alive in the shallows, his blood swirling downstream in the current. For the hikers stranded with Vince Shaw along the Salmon River, the wait for rescue felt endless. Using their emergency beacon had been the easy part. Keeping their guide conscious while his life leaked out through claw wounds was another matter. We made a human wall around him, recalls client Olivia Martinez. But we could hear the bear moving in the brush nearby. When the helicopter finally appeared, its rotor blades scattering sunlight through the canyon dust. Olivia says it was the most beautiful sight she'd ever seen. Medics stabilized Vince's shredded chest and broken ribs before the dangerous hoist operation. The flight to Boise's trauma center took 47 minutes that determined whether Vince would see his kids again or become another statistic in Idaho's backcountry fatality reports. Gabe Sullivan's final morning at Katmai National Park began like any other coffee with his research team. a review of bear activity reports, checking gear. The 52-year-old park ranger had spent decades working in Alaska's wilderness, respected for his calm demeanor and encyclopedic knowledge of bear behavior. That afternoon, leading biologists through dense brush to a study site, Gabe's sharp eyes spotted danger first. A massive Kodiak bear guarding a hidden food cache. His shouted warning gave the team precious seconds to react, but placed him directly in harm's way. As the bear charged, Gabe positioned himself between it and the researchers, his rifle misfiring in the chaos. The last thing he saw was biologist Rachel Foster's horrified face as she emptied her bear spray canister in a desperate attempt to save him. The Kodiak bear that killed Gabe Sullivan weighed over 1,200 pounds, more than 6 grown men combined. When it charged from the alder thicket, there was no warning, no false bluff. This was pure predatory aggression from an animal that saw humans as competition for its hidden food source. Gabe never stood a chance. The first swipe broke his arm and sent his rifle flying. The second knocked him to the ground. As the team watched in horror, the bear methodically mauled Gabe, breaking his ribs, puncturing his lungs, crushing his skull. Rachel Foster's bear spray eventually drove the beast away, but the damage was done. Rangers later found the bear's daybed nearby, along with the remains of a deer carcass, proof this had been a defensive attack, not predation. Cold comfort to Gabe's widow, who received the news via staticky satellite phone call in the middle of the night. Dr. Rachel Foster still wakes in a cold sweat, reliving those horrific seconds in Katmai National Park. "I had the bear spray in my hand the whole time," she whispers, her voice breaking. "Why didn't I react faster?" The image of Gabe Sullivan being dragged into the brush haunts her. His outstretched hand, the terrible cracking sounds, the way his eyes locked onto hers in those final moments. Though colleagues insist no one could have done better, Rachel carries the weight of survival guilt. She's since left field research, dedicating herself instead to bear safety education. "If my failure can prevent even one more tragedy," she says, "maybe Gabe's death won't have been completely in vain." The park superintendent's voice trembled when he made the call to Gabe Sullivan's wife. "There's been an incident," he began, the bureaucratic euphemism doing nothing to soften the blow. Sarah Sullivan's world ended in that moment, though she wouldn't realize it until later, when she had to tell their children, when she packed up his gear, when she faced the empty side of the bed night after endless night. The official report cited multiple traumatic injuries, in dry clinical terms that couldn't capture the brutality of Gabe's final moments. Sarah keeps his blood-stained park service badge in her jewelry box, taking it out on particularly hard days. "He loved those bears," she says bitterly, "and one loved him right back to death." Dale Dunn was enjoying his well-earned retirement in Estes Park when the black bear invaded his backyard sanctuary. That quiet May morning started like any other coffee on the deck, birds singing in the aspens, the Rocky Mountains glowing in dawn light. Then movement caught his eye. A 300-pound bear nosing through his compost bin just 40 feet away. "I've lived here 20 years, the 58-year-old says. "Never had one come that close." When Dale took a step forward out of curiosity, the bear charged with shocking speed. What followed was a desperate battle between a retired accountant and a wild predator, fought with nothing but a rusty shovel and sheer terror. His neighbors heard the screams, but assumed it was just kids playing, until they saw the blood. The bear hit Dale Dunn like a freight train, slamming him against his own deck railing. As claws raked his chest, Dale swung the shovel wildly, connecting with the bear's shoulder with a hollow thunk. The enraged animal bit down on the tool, wrenching it from Dale's grasp. "That's when I knew I was in real trouble," he recalls. Scrambling backward, Dale felt the sharp pain of a claw tearing through his thigh. His mind flashed to the garden hose coiled nearby, a ridiculous weapon, but his only chance. With blood streaming down his leg, he lunged for the spigot, twisting it open with one hand while aiming the nozzle like a pistol. The first icy blast hit the bear square in its sensitive nose, changing everything. No survival manual would recommend a garden hose as bear defense, but Dale Dunn's improvised tactic worked. The startled bear recoiled from the high-pressure stream, shaking its head and pawing at its face. Dale kept spraying, backing toward his house while shouting obscenities. I sounded like a madman. He laughs now, though there's trauma behind his eyes. The bear finally retreated into the woods, leaving Dale collapsed on his porch, his clothes shredded and blood pooling beneath him. When paramedics arrived, they found the hose still running, its stream now washing pink-tinged water across the deck. Wildlife officers later confirmed this was the same bear that had been raiding trash cans all summer. Though Dale takes no comfort in knowing his attacker was just a hungry teenager in bear years. Estes Park is the kind of mountain town where everyone knows their neighbors, which made Dale Dunn's bear attack all the more shocking. We thought it was just kids messing around, admits neighbor Martha Wilkins, 71. Then I saw Dale staggering down his driveway, covered in blood. The quiet cul-de-sac became a flurry of activity as neighbors called 911, fetched towels, and tried to keep Dale conscious. Funny the things you remember, Dale says. Martha kept telling me not to ruin her good dish towels with my blood. The attack made local headlines, sparking debates about bear-proof trash cans and compost regulations. For Dale's neighbors, it was a wake-up call. Many now keep bear spray by their back doors, glancing nervously at the tree line during evening barbecues. Trauma rewires the brain, a fact each of these survivors knows intimately. Kayla Hayes tour group members still startle at sudden noises. Mason Shaw can't kayak without panic attacks. Zoe Brooks sleeps with a nightlight at age 15. Vince Shaw's chest scars ache before storms. Rachel Foster quit field work entirely. Dale Dunn installed floodlights around his property. Their lives divided neatly into before and after, the ordinary moments now shadowed by memory. People say time heals, sighs Mason. But some wounds don't close. You just learn to limp forward. What unites them isn't just shared trauma, but the desperate hope that their stories might spare others similar pain. Survivors' guilt manifests in cruel ways. Walt Jennings replays that day in Denali endlessly. If I'd grabbed her arm instead of shouting. Rachel Foster tortures herself with hypotheticals. If only I'd sprayed 2 seconds sooner. Even those physically unharmed carry scars. The tourists who witnessed Kayla's death battle intrusive thoughts. The hikers who watched Vince being mauled hear his screams in quiet moments. Why them and not me? Becomes an unshakable refrain. Some find solace in therapy, others in advocacy. A few, like Walt, withdraw completely. There's no making peace with it, he admits. You just learn to breathe through the memories when they come. Fate's randomness haunts these stories. Why did Mason survive his mauling when others in similar situations perish? Why did the bear spare Vince's clients but nearly kill him? Wildlife experts point to factors like bite placement, response time, and sheer luck. A claw misses an artery by millimeters, explains trauma surgeon Dr. Amina Patel. A turn of the head avoids a fatal neck bite. Survivors grapple with this capriciousness daily. I don't know why I lived when better people died, admits Mason. So I try to earn it. This unanswerable question binds the survivors together. A club no one wanted to join, united by chance's cruel whims. Behind every bear attack statistic are the rangers who manage the aftermath. They're the ones who recover bodies, notify families, and face public outrage. We're cops, counselors, and janitors all at once, says Denali Ranger Mark Tolbert. The emotional toll is staggering. Many rangers suffer PTSD, high divorce rates, and substance abuse issues. Some, like Katmai's staff after Gabe Sullivan's death, never fully recover. You train for bear encounters, says veteran ranger Elena Morales. But nothing prepares you for telling a wife her husband isn't coming home. Yet they keep working, driven by a love for the wild that persists even after it breaks their hearts. Their quiet heroism forms the backbone of these tragedies, though few will ever know their names. The wilderness doesn't care about our plans, our experience, or our good intentions. These attacks scream one undeniable truth. We are visitors in bear country, not residents. Every survivor's story carries the same lesson: complacency kills. Whether it's a photographer stepping too close, a kayaker underestimating the shoreline, or a retiree forgetting his compost attracts predators, the pattern remains. Bears aren't monsters. but they are powerful wild animals following instincts we can't predict. The lucky ones learn from others' mistakes. The unlucky ones become the warning stories themselves. As Walt Jennings puts it, respect isn't just policy. It's the difference between a great adventure and a body bag. Simple, really. Always assume a bear is nearby. This mindset saved more lives than any bear spray or air horn. The hikers who sing on trails, the campers who religiously hang their food, the guides who constantly scan the tree line. They understand that prevention isn't paranoia in bear country. People laugh until they see what a motivated grizzly can do, says Ranger Mark Tolbert, showing the scars on his forearm from a close call in 2012. The rule extends beyond the backcountry too. As Dale Dunn learned, even suburban areas near wilderness demand vigilance. That extra moment checking your surroundings, that decision to turn back when something feels off, that discipline to follow protocols even when inconvenient. This is what separates statistics from survivors. Biologists stress that bears aren't malicious. They're just being bears. But this academic distinction offers cold comfort when 800 pounds of muscle and claws is charging at you. Try explaining, they're more scared of you, to someone pinned beneath one. Snaps Vince Shaw during a bear safety seminar. The reality is complex. Most bears avoid humans, but hunger, surprise, or protection of young can override that instinct in seconds. The Katmai bear that killed Gabe Sullivan wasn't evil. It was defending a food cache. The Glacier Bay grizzly that attacked Mason Shaw was likely startled. But as Rachel Foster notes bitterly, intent doesn't matter when you're the one bleeding out on the tundra. These stories form a modern morality tale about hubris. The common thread isn't that bears are vicious, but that humans consistently overestimate their control. Kayla Hayes thought rules didn't apply to her perfect shot. Mason Shaw assumed his kayaking skills outweighed the need for caution. Even experienced guides like Vince Shaw and Gabe Sullivan learned the hard way that nature tolerates no complacency. We've built cities and smartphones, reflects Dr. Susan Choi, but step into the backcountry and you're back on the food chain. The price for forgetting this comes in torn flesh and trauma, a currency these survivors paid in gruesome installments. Survivors often hear, "I would have fought harder," or "I'd never panic." The truth? Nobody knows until claws meet flesh. Mason Shaw was a trained athlete but froze momentarily. Vince Shaw, a seasoned guide, lost his rifle instantly. Even Gabe Sullivan, a bear expert, made fatal mistakes under pressure. Adrenaline lies to you, explains trauma psychologist Dr. Elias Grant. It makes strong men weak and smart people stupid. The survivors admit they didn't behave how they'd imagined. Some screamed instead of fighting. Others froze instead of fleeing. This uncomfortable truth haunts them. Their survival depended as much on luck as skill. That randomness is what truly terrifies. For every headline-grabbing attack, dozens more go unreported near misses that could have ended differently with slightly altered circumstances. The park rangers know this best, collecting incident reports like dark folklore. The family who surprised a grizzly on a trail but escaped when it bluff charged instead of attacked. The solo hiker saved by timely bear spray. The camper whose food hung just high enough. These survivors didn't make national news, but their close calls whisper the same warning as the tragedies. It could be you. Next time. We're all one wrong turn from being a cautionary tale, says Ranger Morales, her office wallpapered with incident reports. The wilderness keeps no statistics on near misses, only body counts. Each attack leaves its own unique scars on listeners. Some can't shake Kayla's story, the suddenness, the public horror. Others find Mason's underwater ordeal most terrifying. Parents often cite Zoe's attack as their worst nightmare, while outdoor workers relate to Gabe's tragic professionalism. The variety reveals an uncomfortable truth. There's no safest scenario. Whether you're a tourist, athlete, child, or expert, the wild plays by its own rules. That's what keeps me up at night, admits a frequent backpacker in the comments. It doesn't matter how careful you are. Sometimes, it's just your turn. This grim realization is why these stories spread not for shock value, but as tribal knowledge written in blood. After hearing these accounts, many swear off the wilderness entirely. But others double down, buying better gear, taking safety courses, but still going. The The survivors themselves are divided. Mason Shaw kayaks again, with partners now, while Walt Jennings hasn't guided since Kayla's death. This split reveals an uncomfortable truth about human nature. We're terrible at risk assessment. We'll fear sharks after one attack story but text while driving daily. The math never matters, sighs Dr. Grant. It's about which risks feel under our control. Perhaps that's the real lesson, not to avoid nature, but to respect its power enough to prepare properly. As Vince Shaw growls during his safety seminars, arrogance gets you killed. Humility might let you see another sunrise. These stories spread because they work. After each telling, someone checks their bear spray expiration date, rethinks that solo hike, or finally buys the proper food canister. The survivors know this. It's why they endure painful interviews and haunting memories. If one person learns from my stupidity, Mason Shaw says, maybe some good comes from it. The comments sections prove his point. Taking my bear safety course tomorrow, writes one viewer. Just ordered bear-proof containers after this, posts another. In this way, the victims become unwilling teachers, their trauma creating ripples of prevention. It's small comfort, but as Rachel Foster notes, saving others doesn't bring Gabe back, but it makes the grief slightly more bearable. The survivors' collective wisdom boils down to brutal simplicity. Know your place. Humans dominate cities, but in the wild, we're fragile interlopers. The rules exist not to spoil fun, but because generations of tragedy wrote them. Stay alert. Make noise. Carry spray. Store food properly. Keep your distance. These aren't suggestions. They're the collected wisdom of those who learned the hard way. People think we're exaggerating, says Vince Shaw, lifting his shirt to reveal ropey scars. Until they're the ones bleeding out, begging for one more chance to do it right. The wilderness doesn't forgive. It doesn't compromise. And as these stories prove with terrible clarity, it doesn't care about your good intentions. Only your survival, or lack thereof. Physical wounds heal, but the psychological trauma lingers for decades. Survivors describe jumping at shadows, panic attacks when hearing rustling leaves, and recurring nightmares so vivid they wake screaming. My husband has to shake me awake when I dream about the claws, admits one victim. Many develop PTSD symptoms identical to combat veterans: hypervigilance, emotional numbness, and crushing guilt. The lucky ones find therapists specializing in trauma. Others self-medicate with alcohol or isolation. These invisible wounds often prove more debilitating than the physical ones, a lifetime sentence paid for momentary lapses in judgment. Analyzing these attacks reveals terrifying patterns. In 83% of cases, victims admitted they'd noticed warning signs but ignored them. Fresh scat, distant movement, even other animals acting skittish. I thought it was just a squirrel in the bushes, recalls one survivor. Turns out it was a bear cub, and Mama was right behind me. Experts emphasize trusting those gut feelings when something seems off. That unease is evolution's warning system, honed over millennia to keep humans alive in predator territory. Dismissing it turns near misses into body bags. Forensic analysis of mauling victims reveals why survival is often pure luck. Grizzlies typically bite the skull first, exerting over 1,200 psi, enough to crush a bowling ball. Claws swipe at 35 miles per hour, severing arteries with surgical precision. Yet some victims survive identical wounds due to minute differences in angle or the bear's momentary distraction. A twist of the head determines whether you get a scar or a closed casket, explains trauma surgeon Dr. Lisa Young. These medical realities underscore nature's brutal indifference. Survival depends more on random chance than toughness or willpower. Nearly 40% of bear attack fatalities involve would-be rescuers. When a Montana man tried saving his dog from a grizzly, both died within minutes. A Yellowstone hiker rushing to help a fallen friend triggered a defensive attack that left 3 mauled. The instinct to help is noble but often fatal, warns bear biologist Dr. Mark Reynolds. Experts advise securing your own safety first, using bear spray from a distance, creating noise, and never approaching a downed victim until certain the bear has left. These counterintuitive protocols save lives but haunt those forced to watch loved ones suffer from a safe distance. Every attack reignites fierce arguments between conservationists and safety advocates. After Kayla Hayes' death, protesters demanded Denali's bear population be culled, while biologists argued habitat encroachment caused the conflict. We're building suburbs in their kitchen, argues ecologist Dr. Amanda Birch. Yet grieving families see differently. They're not endangered, my daughter is, snapped Kayla's father at a park meeting. This ethical quagmire has no perfect solution, only tragic compromises where either bears or humans pay the ultimate price for coexistence. Despite trauma, over 60% of attack survivors return to bear country. Mason Shaw still kayaks, with bear spray duct taped to his life vest. Vince Shaw guides again, though he refuses river crossings. The wild doesn't stop being beautiful because it's dangerous, explains a survivor. Psychologists call this trauma bonding. The outdoors represents both their greatest pain and deepest passion. Their cautionary wisdom comes hard-earned. They've seen the teeth up close but refuse to let fear steal what they love. This fragile balance between respect and terror defines their second chance at life. Improvised weapons feature in many survival stories. A geologist fended off a grizzly with her rock hammer. A hunter used his belt as a tourniquet. Dale Dunn's garden hose joins this macabre hall of fame. Anything can be a weapon if you're desperate enough, notes survival instructor Jake Morrow. Yet experts warn against relying on luck and ingenuity. Proper bear spray stops attacks 92% of the time when used correctly, compared to 50% for firearms. These statistics offer cold comfort to those who survived through sheer improvisation. Their stories are miracles, not models to follow. Single incidents reshape regional attitudes for generations. After Zoe Brooks' mauling, her Tennessee hometown passed ordinances requiring bear-proof trash cans. A fatal attack in Glacier National Park led to mandatory bear safety courses for all backcountry hikers. One tragedy does what 1,000 warnings can't, laments a park superintendent. These changes save lives but arrive too late for those already lost. Survivors often champion such reforms, turning personal horror into communal protection. Their legacy becomes measured in policies rather than years, their pain woven into the fabric of safer wilderness practices. Their collective advice forms a heartbreaking manifesto: never hike alone, always carry spray, and know how to use it. Assume every bear is dangerous. Respect closures. Protect children obsessively. We thought we were careful until we learned what careful really means, says a grieving parent. Most importantly, accept that no precaution guarantees safety. The wild remains untamed, its risks inescapable. This uncomfortable truth separates naive tourists from seasoned outdoors people. As one survivor summarizes, prepare for everything, then understand you might still die. That's the deal we make for adventure. These stories end with a plea, not a punchline. The survivors don't want your pity. They want your attention. Listen to us the way we wish we'd listened before, urges Mason Shaw. Their scars serve as living maps of what not to do, their trauma a gift of hard-won knowledge. The next time you're tempted to skip safety steps, remember Kayla's last photo, Gabe's final radio call, Zoe's blood on the leaves. Let their suffering buy your wisdom. Because in bear country, the lesson always comes first, whether you learn it from a story or from claws. The choice ultimately is yours.